For today, I'm really delighted. I have a special guest, an old friend of mine, and somebody who WITA hasn't had a chance to work with in the past, but I've had a chance to work with, and that's Nancy McLernon from the Organization for International Investment. They're a fantastic group. I know Nancy can tell you more about it. She actually helped found the group more than 20 years ago, and she's the president and CEO of that group. She's going to make talk about a study they did, which she told me about a few months ago, that they were doing to examine the impact of TPP and TTIP in the 50 states and what it means for investment. And I thought it was a fascinating topic and something that would be really interesting for the WITA membership. So really pleased, Nancy, that you could be here. She's going to be introduced by Tim Keeler, our board member from Mayor Brown. Tim's going to introduce Nancy. And then when Nancy's done, we're going to pivot to a panel discussion where we'll get into some other aspects of TPP and the impact in the states. With that, Tim.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. I'm pleased and delighted to introduce Nancy McLernon with the Organization for International Investment, a really unique trade association in town with a diverse membership, one common attribute being they are U.S.-based subsidiaries of global companies. Nancy is prolific in the press, the media, the TV, and print in making the case on behalf of her members. As Ken mentioned, she's been with the organization for a long time. Prior to being named as president and CEO, she was OFII's senior vice president, where she focused on strategic communications and advocacy. Nancy holds a master's in economics from George Mason University. My law degree is from George Mason University, so I'm a big fan of that as well. And her undergrad is from Virginia Polytechnic Institute, State University. Prior to joining OFII, Nancy was legislative director for trade policy at Citizens for a Sound Economy here in DC. So I think on behalf of WITA, we're delighted to have Nancy here on behalf of OFII and look forward to her remarks.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Ken, for inviting me to speak today. I'm really pleased to kick off the discussion on trade agreements and the states. In particular, I am pleased to have the opportunity to discuss an element of trade agreements that has largely been missing from the conversation. In addition to stimulating the export and import of goods and services, trade agreements have the potential to attract more global investment into the United States and with it, quality jobs. Created more than 2 decades ago, it's actually been 25 years since we started the organization. The Organization for International Investment represents the U.S. operation of many of the world's leading global companies. Companies like BASF, Sony, Airbus, and Brother International. These are all companies that have insourced millions of jobs in America. We work to ensure the United States is the top location for global investment, and as such, we advocate for policies that will encourage more global investment in the United States, increase American employment, and boost U.S. economic growth. The countries that comprise, and this is why we did the study that Ken mentioned, that comprise the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership represent about 90% of foreign direct investment in the United States already. And therefore, TTIP and TPP have the potential to dramatically increase America's competitiveness for global investment. So first, let's spend a bit of time understanding why we should be competitive for global investment. In short, foreign direct investment provides the types of jobs America needs. Global companies already employ 6.1 million Americans across the country, up about 5.5% from last year. These companies support an annual payroll of $488 billion annually, paying an average of $80,000 in compensation to their U.S. workers, which is about 33% higher than the economy-wide average. Nearly 2.3 million of the 6.1 million that I referenced are in the manufacturing sector, representing 37% of all jobs at U.S. subsidiaries of foreign companies, and 18% of all manufacturing jobs in the U.S. are at U.S. subsidiaries of global companies. Somewhat counterintuitively, foreign companies in the United States produce goods not only for U.S. consumers, but also for customers around the world. These firms produce a whopping 23% of total U.S. exports, providing $360 billion in American goods annually to customers all around the world. That said, we actually have to work to keep America competitive for global investment. Although the United States remains a top destination for global investment, America's share of foreign direct investment over the past 15 years has dropped precipitously. In 2000, the U.S. received roughly about 40% of the world's cross-border investment. Last year, it received only about 20%. During that same period, Europe actually increased its share of global investment from 30 to 35%, and developing economies have captured a growing share. To provide some context for those figures, we polled 100 of our chief financial officers to ask them, what is your top location for growth over the next 5 years? Nearly 3/4 of them identified a BRIC country, and only 13% indicated the United States. So clearly, policymakers cannot take global investment in the U.S. for granted. We can't take for granted the investment Bridgestone, a Japan-based tire manufacturer, is making in North Carolina, or Japan-based Panasonic's massive investment in Nevada as it helps build the Tesla Gigafactory. When thinking about trade agreements and their impact on making the U.S. more competitive for global investment, there are really three main ways that trade agreements can encourage global investment. First, comprehensive trade agreements include provisions that directly improve access and protections for investment by inbound companies, such as lifting local content requirements. In the CFO survey I mentioned earlier, more than 1/4 of executives said that their companies have faced discrimination on government contracts in the United States. Second, reducing tariffs and non-tariff barriers and improving regulatory cooperation allows companies to operate more efficiently across borders, helping them to grow and expand. Reduced trade barriers also make the United States more attractive as an export platform, as I mentioned earlier, for global companies to reach both domestic and regional consumers. So simply put, global companies can be more successful in countries that embrace the dynamics of the global economy. It helps them operate more seamlessly across borders. Mexico, for instance, I'm sure many of you know this statistic, but they continue to land major investments due in part to its expansive trade network. Mexico's free trade agreements reach 46 countries, including the EU. The United States, our FTAs cover just about 20 countries. In the United States, we have seen positive global investment benefits from recent trade agreements. For instance, since the free trade agreement between the United States and South Korea took effect in 2012, South Korean firms have increased their investment in the United States by more than 40%. Headlined by Samsung's multi-billion-dollar investment in Texas's semiconductor manufacturing plant. Third, the economic growth produced by trade agreements attracts additional investment to grow America's economy. For example, when a major investment by an Australian company in Indiana happens, it will create additional investment from suppliers and collaborators. Some of those will be fellow global companies, but many will be local businesses that expand as a result of that initial foreign investment. In fact, according to a study that we did recently, for every one manufacturing job at a foreign-owned company, 5 additional jobs pop up in the U.S. economy. That is an enormously disproportionate positive impact on the economy. So as Ken mentioned, last year we commissioned a study to quantify for the first time ever how future trade agreements would influence foreign direct investment flows. Specifically, the study examined how TPP and TTIP would impact global investment and related jobs in the United States, with a detailed analysis in all 50 states.